You're listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. And now, here are your hosts, Sarah and Esteban.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 178. Today's podcast is brought to you by Elite Science. Unlock your dog's full potential with a unique competitive edge solution, 1TDC. One Tetradecanol Complex is a patented blend of unique fatty acid oils designed to safely and effectively keep joints and muscles at their best to maximize performance and shorten recovery time. 1TDC is the next generation of fatty acids and is used by many current and past national agility champions and world team members. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at bda1tdc.com. That's BDA1TDC.com. Today's podcast is also brought to you by HitItBoard.com. HitItBoard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The HitIt board can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to HitItBoard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's BDA, the number 10. That's HitItBoard.com. Today, we're going to talk about pushing the edge. And what I mean is, we want you to push the edge of what you and your dog are capable of. Most of the time, this is something that I associate with the commitment of the dog to an obstacle, the commitment to the dog to the jump on a wrap, the commitment of the dog to the backside instead of the front side when I give a backside cue. And it all comes down to being able to give the dog information, trust that they're going to respond to that, and then move on to the next part of the course.
Before we get into all of that, I think we need to take a step back and really think about how dog agility started. And agility started kind of like rally obedience today, right? There were just a bunch of stations. Your dog would do one obstacle, then you go to the next obstacle and the next obstacle and jump on a table and then go and do a chute and then jump through a tire. Rather than thinking of it as a course that you were trying to get through as fast as you possibly could. And so even after it started getting faster, and we just did a great article looking at the yards per second, which is the speed of dogs in agility in the American Kennel Club, the AKC, over the last, what was the time frame?
Since 1999.
Right. So that's like almost 20 years.
That's right.
And so 20 years of data shows that dogs have been getting faster, right? Pretty much every year, almost linearly. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
And so dogs keep getting faster. And so the idea here is instead of handling it one obstacle at a time, where you watch your dog take a jump, you see them approach the jump, you see their front legs lift off the ground, you see them jump beautifully over the jump, you watch them land, and then you say, oh my God, I've been watching my dog. Where's the next obstacle? I need to run to that. We've learned over these 20 years that you need to indicate to your dog, take this obstacle, and I'm going to trust you to finish that obstacle, to take that obstacle, and I'm going to move toward the next obstacle. So we don't have that awkward in between the obstacle moment where the dog turns and looks at you. And this is going to sound very familiar to instructors because you see this in your novice people, and it's going to sound very familiar to novice people, right? Those of you who are new in agility, how many times has your dog done an obstacle and then stopped or slowed down, turned towards you and looked at you, maybe barked at you while you were desperately trying to show them what's supposed to be next?
And I think that as we review video, we see more and more that dogs are preparing for what comes next well before they take an obstacle, whether they're going to hug the right wing or the left wing, whether they're going to, take off an extension or put in an extra stride. All of those things go into the performance of one obstacle.
That's right. So I will make the case that if your dog is taking jump number 3, as they're taking off for jump number 3, they're already desperate to know where's obstacle number 4. what's obstacle number 4? Where am I going? How am I going to get there? And that's why it's our job as handlers to show them that. And think of it like being a baker. All right, I'm making a cake. Once I mix the batter, pour that thing in a pan, and I toss it in the oven, I'm going to trust that oven to cook that. I'm going to set the timer for 35 minutes. And now I've got 35 minutes to go and work on all the other things I need to do to make my beautiful cake. Imagine if I didn't have that freedom. Imagine if I had to look at my cake the entire time it was baking. So that's time spent there watching the cake bake that I can't use to do other things that I need to make a great cake.
Get your icing ready.
Sure. And so in agility, it's the same way, right? If you're watching your dog from the moment they take off to the moment they land, and you're just there frozen, you're not moving on to the next thing, you're in trouble.
That's right.
And so when we talk about pushing the edge here, I think what you're talking about is looking for ways to basically get away from your dog, to increase the distance between you and your dog, because we can use that distance, that time, that extra time and distance to get to the next obstacle, to better show your dog the path. And that's where I like to say, hey, let's straighten out the line here. Instead of your dog taking massive wide turns and zigzag curves, we're going to make the line as straight as possible. And that's going to give you the fastest time.
And the key to being able to signal an obstacle and move on is to know exactly when your dog is committed, when they're going to take the obstacle, and you don't have to watch them do it any longer. You don't have to give them any more information. They know what they're doing and where they're going to go next.
And I think this is a famous or infamous point of contention among trainers, right? You ask 10 very experienced agility people and say, when is a dog committed to an obstacle? And some people will say they're not committed until they're jumping, right? Their front feet are off the ground, maybe even their rear feet off the ground. Other people will say they are committed as soon as they see the obstacle, even though they're still jumping over in the air on the obstacle before. Other people like to say the stride before takeoff. In our analyses, I'm always looking at what does a dog see on the stride before takeoff? The factual answer is it depends on the dog. And by definition, commitment point is that moment at which the dog will no longer deviate from his path.
That's right. And I think that there are two different ways of thinking about that commitment point. One is, at what point can the dog physically no longer change their path? And that's going to be very similar among dogs. And absolutely, when they start to lift off, they're committed. But for our purposes, I can commit a dog to an obstacle and I could still pull them off with handling. But what I want to know is, as long as I don't tell my dog that I've changed my mind, basically, how far back can I commit my dog and move on to the next course and trust them to finish their job? And I think that's a slightly different view of commitment. It's an understanding commitment. It's not when are they physically committed to the jump. It's when are they mentally committed to the jump.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we talked about the value of being able to move on, the value of having strong commitment by our dogs and having that give us some time to move along the course. And so how do we get that commitment? And you get that commitment in practice, and you get it by little leaving earlier and earlier and having your dog continue to take the obstacle.
Well, what are we really talking about here? Let me give you an example that I got just from someone today. Sent me a message. They're doing front crosses, and when they front cross too late, their dog turns wide. When they front cross too early, their dog refuses to take the jump at all. So in my view, late is late. It's very difficult to improve anything, right? The quality of your turn, the speed of a maneuver when you are late. And you then only have the option of working on the early part, right? And fortunately, that's something we can do. So you can turn a little bit earlier. You can leave the jump sooner. And even though your dog is refusing now, you can teach them to go ahead and take that jump and then end up having a tight turn. So it just requires improving your dog's commitment point. Whereas if you're trying to work from the other side, right? What you're saying is, I'm going to do this late and I want you to still turn tight, even though I'm always going to do it late, right? Or in moments when I want to do it late. So that doesn't make sense. So you can really only approach this problem you can only push the edge from the commitment side, right? Not the late execution side.
In that case, what we like to say is, we don't want you to handle poorly in order to get the right result from your dog. We want to use other things, placement of reward, a helper, a toy placed at, just the right spot to help your dog respond to what you are doing correctly, rather than continuing to practice this late cue that we're giving our dogs. So this is something that we are constantly pushing with our own dogs. And I think there's a lot of great benefits besides just building in that extra space that you get between you and your dog that lets you handle the rest of the course. One of them is, if you are never pushing the edge of what your dog is capable of, you don't know what they're capable of, right? If your dog never makes a mistake, if they never pull off a jump, if they never, take the front side when you want to the back side, then you are probably giving them more help than they need. And they may be way more committed than you even realized.
Right. In some sense, this is playing it too safe.
Right.
In another sense, this is just costing you a lot of time. And in a third sense, it's a result of the rules in agility. And let me explain what I mean. Let's say you execute a maneuver late, out of position, everything about it is bad. Let's say it's a front cross. Your turn is really wide, but your dog doesn't go off course. They don't drop a bar. There's no refusal. You just have a wide turn. You lose time. All right, maybe you're not going to win this time, but you still got that clean run, that qualifying run. Now, let's say you do your move very early or very far away from the jump. So your timing is not early. It's not that you're doing your front cross ridiculously early. It's just that you're very far away from the jump. And your dog makes the opposite mistake, right?
They refuse.
So they don't take the obstacle. Now, guess what? That's a fault. So now you have lost your qualifying run. And so the rules of agility has shaped handlers to favor one mistake, one error, I should say. And I'm not assigning blame here to your dog. It's not really your dog's mistake. If you want to look at it as a handler's mistake, that's fine. But it has shaped us to favor one mistake over the other. We are accepting of the wide turns. Sure, it's bad. Sure, we want to fix it, but it's okay. You still have your clean run. But the early refusal, that's a disaster.
That's right.
Now you can't qualify anymore.
And in a lesson in operant conditioning here, when you pull your dog off early, you're punished right then in the moment with the in cue, even though ultimately you might get more cues later on by finding out where that
will be better when you get to a national final. That handling flexibility and spacing that you've developed now gives you an edge. But you can't see that in the moment.
You can't see that in the moment. And when you accept those wide turns weekend after weekend after weekend and get the cue that comes with them, the punishment comes way later. It comes way later when you can't compete at nationals, when you can't make the finals because you're off the time by a second because of several wide turns, or when you get to a level in competition where you can no longer handle the course because you have to, be too close to your dog in every spot, there is. So that's a very interesting way of looking at it because it's very true. We are being conditioned as handlers. So one little saying that I came up with at some point, and I tell everybody that I work with, this comes out of my mouth at some point, is I will say, if you are never too early, you are probably always too late. And the idea there is, if you have a range of performance, there should be this, you should, if there was a perfect range, then sometimes you should be too early and sometimes you should be too late. If you are never, ever, ever too early, then that means you've taken that entire range of performance and put it on one side of the curve so that, you are sometimes maybe your timing is perfect, but the rest of the time it's going to be late. It's never early. And so you always want to be pushing when you are occasionally too early. That means you are riding that edge. I view that as a good thing when it's occasional, right? And if I have somebody that never is too early, then, that's not as good in terms of training. You don't know where that point is for your dog. The other thing that I think this really benefits is the confidence and understanding of the dog. So when you give your dog that extra help every single time, you're not asking them to, think as much on their own. They're just following what you're doing. When you push that edge, you are going to have a repetition where the dog isn't quite sure. You're right at that edge. And they might even slow down a little bit and then do the correct thing. They might, slow down and then go ahead and take the jump. Or if you're working on a backside, they might start to cut in and then realize and go to the back, but they're a little tentative. But those are the repetitions that when you jackpot that moment of decision on your dog's part, I wasn't sure what you wanted, but I think this is it. And you say, yes, that is what I wanted. Then those are the repetitions where they're really learning. They're not learning when you're doing it the same way every time and they're just doing it, by rote. They know what they're doing, but they aren't progressing. They're staying right exactly where they are. So I want to step back and give a viewpoint that I had 10 or 15 years ago in agility, because I think that this is the counter argument. And I just want people to understand that I know where you're coming from, because I remember thinking 15 years ago that I was young, I was athletic, and if I could get all the way to the jump for every single obstacle, if I could give my dog that support, why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I make it easier for my dog everywhere that I can? And since then, you come to realize that, number one, as you progress in the sport, that becomes impossible, depending on the level of competition that you want to get to. If you're going to start doing premier, if you want to do international competition, even if you want to do well at final events at the AKC Nationals or the Invitational or USDAA, it becomes impossible to be at every spot. And if that is the only thing you and your dog know, then at the moment when you need that extra commitment from your dog, you don't know if you have it or not.
Sure. I think when you look at agility, say you have 20 obstacles, ideally as a handler, if you were, one, you'd be as fast as your dog. And two, you'd just go to every obstacle. Hey, dog, I'm at number 2 while the dog's taking number 1. Hey, now I'm at number 3 while the dog's taking number 2. I'm at number 4. And you're arriving at each obstacle the dog needs to take while your dog is finishing up the obstacle before, right? That's ideal. And so people would try and do that as much as possible. And then you realize, okay, I can't do that. My dog is significantly faster than I am. For some people, that realization comes really early because their dog is so much faster than them, right? Whereas if you're a really fast human with a slower dog, you can get away with that kind of handling, right? And there's very little incentive for you to try some kind of different handling, right? You don't need lateral distance. You don't need distance. You don't need to leave obstacles early because you can literally show your dog through the course one obstacle at a time. Well, it turns out that judges are not stupid, right? They're very aware of this trend. And as the competitors get better and the competitions get bigger, they are going to absolutely punish handlers who run in this manner. And I like to call it wing-to-wing running, right? They're going to run from obstacle to obstacle. And it's how I do a bulk of my running, actually, right? And it is at the same time an advantage over competitors who aren't able to run wing to wing. And at the same time, it is your crippling weakness relative to those handlers. So if you talk to me and you say, okay, how good are you really? Everybody wants to say, well, I am good pretty good, mediocre, or bad at agility. And it's just not like that. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to manifest themselves differently depending on the course, right? And depending on your dog. And so for myself, I know that there are areas where I am weak relative to the kinds of courses that I want to run on. And I am going to, with my next dog, really focus on those areas. And one is creating some distance so that I don't have to rely on my speed to get there. And this idea of pushing the edge of commitment is a large part of that. And when I say that, it's not, I don't want people to think that it's doing your cues earlier. Okay. That's not going to fix a lot of issues. It's not going to get you the separation that you need. What I'm talking about is cueing certain maneuvers from a greater distance. The big one for me is deceleration, right? Deceleration is so ubiquitous, right? It's in all of agility. It's so important. And the way that everybody was doing it was at the wing, right? And so now you have a group of handlers who are trying to do it not at the wing, right? We're going to do a lot of these maneuvers and we're going to do them 10 feet from the wing. Can we do it 20 feet from the wing? Can we do it 25 feet and 10 feet lateral to the wing and still get the desired turn from the dog? What if we do it a little earlier? And so now you see people where the dog is heading to take the jump and the handler is already moving the other way past the dog. It's like they're going in opposite directions. And that's not something that you would do, 10 years ago. If you did that, the dog wouldn't take the jump at all. But now we're intentionally training the dog to go ahead and do that obstacle. I've told you that obstacle is next. While you go and take that obstacle, you're responsible for that obstacle. I'm going to run over here and get set up for the next thing. I'm going to go finish baking the rest of this cake.
And I think that another way to look at it is that practice is the time to find that commitment point. And then some competitions, you want to be pushing the edge of that commitment point so that you know where it is. And then when it really counts, those are the times when you can use your physical abilities to their maximum. You can give your dog a little bit more help, but the little bit more help that you give your dog is probably equivalent to the edge of commitment from a year ago. So what I'm saying is that your version today of playing it safe looks like your version of pushing hard and getting off of everything as early as you could from a year before, because you progress, right? And so then in the big event, you can back off just a little bit and you are still going to have spectacular performance and you're going to be able to get to where you need to go because you have pushed the edge so that number one, you know where that edge is. And number two, you are moving that edge through practice. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Elite Science, HitItBoard.com, and also NTI Global. Fall in love with our agility products. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com for the widest selection of dog agility tunnels for both competition and backyard training. Known for free shipping, more options, high quality products, and low prices, NTI Global has got you covered. They also offer tamer and anchor weight bags, along with a full line of accessories and agility storage solutions. Need your agility gear in a hurry? Don't forget to check the in-stock selection. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com and use promo code NTIFall17 for 5% savings off today. Promo code good through October 31st, 2017. You'll also find links to our sponsors on the show notes page. Happy training!
What do you call fake spaghetti? An impasta.